All right, welcome to D-Pod to Win the Game. I am Charles Robinson. He is Frank Schwab. We're coming out of Sunday Night Football. Philadelphia Eagles beat the Green Bay Packers in Philly 40-33. Aaron Rodgers suffers an oblique injury. We see Jordan Love, little pep in his step, replacing Aaron Rodgers. I think it's time for them to sit Rodgers for the remainder of the season. What do you think?
It's interesting. I understand where you're coming from. At very least, it has to be a few weeks because if nothing else, in the back of your mind, you want to get a look at Jordan Love, right? Or even showcase him or whatever you want to do. It's time. It's a good time to get Jordan Love in there, who looked good today. He threw some nice passes, hit Christian Watson on stride on a pass that Watson took all the way up the sideline for a touchdown. You got the feeling like if the Packers defense could have gotten a stop, but things were going to get really interesting at the end. So I'm with you, but you know how that's not how it works. I don't think they're going to convince Aaron Rodgers to sit the rest of the season. I think at some point he's going to feel better. He's going to want to get back in there. I don't think they're going to say no to him. I don't think this is a Stafford situation. Matthew Stafford, I do believe, should be shut down because he suffered 2 concussions back to back. I mean, at that point, okay, now you have to protect him, your future investment. I think if this oblique injury heals for Aaron Rodgers, his thumb's probably going to get better in the meantime, too. I think at that point he does play the final few games. But I do think, you know what, this point in the season, at this point in his development where, okay, Aaron, sit a few weeks. We need to see what Jordan Love's got.
Yeah, I mean, I get that rationale, and I'm sure you're right about Rodgers. But, here's the thing. We watch, as you said, him hit Christian Watson in stride, right? Watch Watson take it to the house. I think the snaps he had after that, he looked, frankly, a little bit better than I expected Jordan Love to look. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting is if they were to, let's say Aaron sits for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? And Love plays really well. I don't think that fan base is going to, I don't think they're going to want to see Aaron Rodgers back in there. I think they're going to say, let's ride it with the kid. Let's see what he looks like. Everybody wants to know what they have. And potentially setting up an offseason where I know Aaron Rodgers, because of the contract, seems wildly untradeable, which is true if Aaron Rodgers is not willing to work with the situation. I think if he's willing to work with the situation, that entire financial mess can be altered and make him a tradable player. I just don't see any way Brian Gutekunst, the general manager there, who has got to be reeling over, look, the defense that he built, you can talk about injuries, whatever you want to say, but the defense he built gave up how many yards last night, Frank? Rushing?
363 rushing. The most for the Eagles since 1948 in a game. That is unbelievable. They were terrible. How often did we hear this offseason, Charles, about, the Packers defense is loaded. Good. They're going to be the best defense in the NFL. They have not been that ever this season. And then rock bottom was Sunday night. I do think real quick before we move back to Rodgers, don't you got to make a change to defensive coordinator? My Wisconsin people, by the way, freaking out. They're like, Jim Leonard, he got passed over for the Wisconsin job. Jim Leonard could just be the Packers defense coordinator tomorrow. And it's like, actually, maybe. Joe Barry what good is there keeping? You got to make some move to basically say this is not acceptable.
Yeah, I don't think. This is it. All season long, they've had issues stopping the run. All season long, we've heard, well, they're working on it, or this guy's out, or, they're going to fix it. It's going to get fixed, or it's going to get better as the season's gone along. And it just has not. And against Philly, they looked flat, listless. I didn't want to say they looked like they were, giving up against the run, but they had no answer at all for what Jalen Hurts decided to do with the football. And he called his number a remarkable number of times because he saw so many holes. Yeah, it's an indictment, not only on the coordinator, but I think Brian Gutekunst as well. I think you got to hold the general manager responsible when you look at the personnel and you go, hey, how much time have you spent focusing on defense? What was everyone always complaining about? Not giving Aaron enough to work with, or not drafting, receivers in the first round, and yada, yada, yada. And here we go. You've got a defense that you've poured assets into that just absolutely got destroyed by the Eagles. We'll see ultimately what happens with Rodgers. I mean, we got to find out.
Real quick, Charles, what do you think these next few weeks will say about his future? Are we saying, if they sit him the rest of the time, then it's just, okay, we've kind of moved on and we want to turn the page if we're available to that? If Jordan Love balls out, does that, obviously that probably changes the math. How do you view the rest of the season for the Packers and their decisions they're going to make with his playing time vis-a-vis what they're going to do in the 2023 offseason?
I actually think this is an opportunity because I think the Packers they still want to get a look at Jordan Love. And if you're out of the playoff race, which effectively you are, you're done, you're toast. This is the point where the front office would normally say, geez, let's play some of the young guys. Let's start to get a look at, some of the pieces, including maybe at quarterback. But because it's Aaron, if it's a healthy Aaron, you're probably like, yeah, we can't do that. Like, we're screwed. We're in this situation where he's not going to accept it.
I don't think Aaron's the guy to be like, yeah, you're right. Just play Jordan. Like,
yeah,
that ain't happening.
Let's go ahead and I'll let you go ahead and affect my future the way I affected Brett Favre's future when I got my opportunity. And I know it was funny because I saw all these tweets about, 2007 November. It's like the same date within days against the one-loss NFC team. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre gets hurt. Aaron Rodgers goes in.
He was awesome in that game too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, look, the way Love played, I was like, if I was the front office, I'd want to see a little more of this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is always interesting, and this whole dance they've had between, is he going to be back? Oh, yeah, he's going to be back, and we'll just see. Because I think, there's a lot more to be said about this story for the rest of the Packers season. Suddenly, strangely enough, they've become kind of relevant the rest of the season. Like, I wasn't going to watch the Packers anymore, but Jordan Love in there. Yeah, I'm a little bit interested. Let's swing it ahead because we wanted to, Thanksgiving, obviously, there were 3 games. We usually don't go back to Thursday games, but Thanksgiving had 3 pretty interesting games for us, so we wanted to hit those quickly. First of all, Buffalo Bills, 28-25 over the Detroit Lions. I thought a huge game for Josh Allen in that he got it done when he had to get it done. I mean, he had been in a little bit of a slump through another red zone pick. I thought him, with I think it's 21 seconds left that he had. It wasn't 13 seconds like Mahomes. But for him to rally the team, get Tyler Bass that game-winning field goal, I thought was huge for him, this team, his confidence, all that kind of stuff.
Well, the hug with Stephon Diggs at the end, where he's basically like, oh my God, we hung on in this one. Like,
yeah, because if they lose, oof, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you could see they were sweating it. And in some ways, not in some way. Look, Dan Campbell, he mishandled that game down the stretch. I mean, his game management with the timeouts was absolutely terrible. I mean, I felt like Detroit botched it. That said, Detroit was sort of, I talked with Jory Epstein in the midweek podcast, just like, hey, I don't know, man. This might be one of those Thanksgiving games where Detroit's up. Like they've on a winning streak and they're going to be competitive. They were definitely competitive in this game, and you're starting to see certain pieces with the Lions where you're like, okay, well, now we know that they have maybe a little viable foundation to work with here. Buffalo, I don't know. I guess I just kind of felt like they escaped, not their best game. But one thing I do think was important in this game, when Von Miller goes down, to me, that's one of those injuries. You'll see them happen on teams now and then where a very pivotal, important player gets carted off and it picks up the head of the team, where they're just kind of like, oh my God, we just lost our guy, our dude, like someone who's really important to the sort of center of what we are. I do think Von going down the way he did really affected the sort of the psyche of the team for a bit.
Yeah, and I mean, Von's one of those guys who we even saw with the Rams last year. He comes in that locker room and he's one of the focal points of the locker room immediately. He's just that personality. That's who he is, and he has that kind of respect around the league. So yeah, I think that's look. Buffalo played 2 games in Detroit in 5 days. Like, they were tired, I think. And now they get the wins. They get the extra rest. I think they're going to be fine going forward just because they got the win. If they would have lost, that's bad news, especially in Miami playing how they are. But they got the win. The next one, it was, Dallas wins 28-20. The bettors know that Daniel Jones rallied for that backdoor cover at the end. Thanks, Daniel. Didn't need that on my Turkey Day plate, but whatever. I thought the Cowboys looked really, really good in this one for most of the game. This is a Super Bowl contender. I've been saying it all along. Yeah. I'll keep saying it. Is a really, really good team that can get after you in different ways. And I thought for most of this game, it was like, the Giants are 7-3, but the other 7-3 team is on such a much different level that it was just no contest.
Yeah, and I think you could see offensively, Dallas is really trending like in the right direction, and we're going to see with the offensive line what happens with Tyron Smith. Basically where this ends up at the end of the season could be exponentially better. In particular, given this was a game that the thought process is Odell Beckham is looking at these two teams, that it's between the Cowboys and the Giants at this stage, and trying to ultimately make that distinction. I think if it's about football and you're sitting there and going, am I going to win a championship? Or if it's about contract, you're probably looking at these two teams differently, because I think if it's about football winning a championship, Dallas is the absolute no-brainer. I think if he wants the contract, I think the Giants might be the team that is probably more likely to give. He wanted a Michael Gallup type of extension last year from the Rams. They weren't going to give him that, especially after the injury. I don't know that the Cowboys are really in a position where they can go, well, we just gave Michael Gallup that deal, so let's give that deal to you, and we got to do CeeDee Lamb down the road.
Right.
I don't know if they want to get themselves in that kind of a mess with a long-term deal. But do you think that game has any distinction for Odell? Like, if you're looking at those two teams, don't you think it's either I go for the money or I go for the money and loving New York, which, by the way, he's infatuated still with New York City as much as he's infatuated with LA, or I go for the championship, which is the Cowboys, the team he grew up loving. His family loves his best friend LeBron loves him. It's two different reasons, I feel like, between those franchises.
It is. And I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say, like, why would you go to the Giants? They're not going in. They might not even end up in the playoffs. I mean, that's a possibility. They could fall out of the playoffs. Whereas the Cowboys look like a Super Bowl contender, but like you said, contract plays a lot into this. Money. I'm not going to tell a guy to take less money if he can make a lot more in a certain situation and play in a place he likes to play. But yeah, football-wise, no doubt. I think Odell, look, if I'm Odell Beckham, and I'm not, obviously, I'd take that. The odds of him getting hurt again, like, what's he going to do? Re-tear his ACL in another Super Bowl? Like, probably not. Take the short-term deal, prove it, get back on the free agent market healthy. You're probably going to do okay there. It didn't work out for him last time, and there's risk involved for sure, but that's what I would do, because this Cowboys team has a real Super Bowl potential. Now, can we talk about what happened at the Miami airport today? Because I'm sitting there and, like, games are going on already.
Yeah.
And there's a work, in our work Slack channel, there's a conversation about, like, hey, I think Odell Beckham was pulled off a flight because he wouldn't buckle his seatbelt. He was falling in and out of consciousness. What happened here? I don't really honestly know many of the details other than what I saw in passing, just because it happened at the exact wrong time for me to read anything about it.
So I read the police report on it. I got my hands on the police report and I read it, and it basically, what was described or what's out there is pretty much what the police said, that it was a situation where he was on the flight, he was unresponsive. I'm not exactly sure what in and out of consciousness means. I don't know if they're trying to imply it was like, some sort of, state where, I don't know. I've been drunk before, like you're in and out of like what is it? What does that mean? Like, what are you suggesting?
Yeah.
Because that's not a normal state for human beings, just to be in and out of consciousness, right?
I do that on a podcast every week. But,
Yeah, if anybody's watched the clips the last couple of weeks, you can see I'm in and out of listening to Frank.
Obviously.
Anyway, look, clearly they're saying there was some kind of state he was in that caused alarm for the flight attendant, who wanted him to buckle his seatbelt. And according to the police, the thought process was, if they take off and he's in and out of it for some kind of a reason, that could get worse. They don't want to be mid-flight in a long flight between Miami and LAX, 5-hour flight, 5-hour plus flight. They don't want something to happen, on this flight in between. Who knows what's true or not. But they end up basically, they board the plane. They say, look, you gotta buckle your seatbelt or you got to deplane. He refused to deplane with everybody else. So then they get called in to take him off. They take him off. They escort him off the plane. His lawyer sent out a statement just saying that, it was a complete overreaction on the part of a flight attendant. I don't know, man. It's weird. I mean, first off, I was
it's weird, for sure.
I was like, why is he flying commercial? I'm like, I can't believe like this guy with this rep is, you don't have somebody with a private jet you can jump on. It was, unless something is going on here that we don't know about, that maybe we find out about later, I don't know that it affects Dallas's pursuit or the Giants' pursuit. I think Jerry's like, hey, Bucky seatbelt.
Right.
Whatever, dude.
Yeah. Hey, when I
All
have
right.
my Johnny Walker black, I always do my seatbelt.
He's
Yeah.
like, I
Johnny
don't,
Walker blue, is it? Whatever he likes it.
I don't tip it back until I'm buckled in.
Whatever the heck was going on there.
It's not my first rodeo.
And then the last game on Thanksgiving, the Minnesota Vikings get a 33-26 win. A good win for the Vikings, obviously. But I think the takeaway here is Mac Jones, I believe, at 382, something in there. Maybe it's 362. I'm getting my numbers wrong. But it kind of shows to me, man, this Vikings defense has some holes to it because Mac Jones shouldn't be going for almost 400 against anybody. But, obviously there was the controversial catch that probably should have held up. I thought Hunter Henry at the end zone would have changed the game, but it doesn't matter. The Vikings get the win, but yet they come out of this game, and I'm like, man, this is why. This is why it's hard to buy into the Vikings, hard to see them playing at the level of the Cowboys, Eagles, 49ers, just because I don't think they have that top level, especially on defense.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it's a little bit of a turnover-driven defense, honestly. Like, I think, like when you go back to the Bills game, right? I mean, that game changed because of the fact that Patrick Peterson, creates inflection points. He has, if he doesn't turn over Josh Allen when he does, it's a completely different conversation we're having about the Vikings. And the problem is with turnovers, you can't count on yourself always creating turnovers. You have to have something else. Like so like Dallas last year, remember Trayvon Diggs? Like it was very much a defense that thrived on turning the ball over. Well, then all of a sudden, if you're not getting those turnovers, you better be able to do at least something else well to affect the game. I think that's what's different about Dallas now is they rush the passer. Whether they're turning it over or not, they create chaos at the line of scrimmage and can dominate the line of scrimmage defensively without having to do a ton of exotic things. I think that's different and what sets them apart defensively. I look at Minnesota and I'm not feeling the same way. I mean, I'm like, okay, they need someone to create a turnover. If they don't do it, they could end up getting in these sort of boat races with teams that, frankly, I didn't think the Patriots should be able to hang with them offensively, especially the Patriots were playing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just a kind of one of those interesting outcomes, and not necessarily just because of who won and who lost. Let's look ahead back to the Sunday games. There was a lot of interesting ones. And I think one of the games that we might remember for a while, Jacksonville 28, Baltimore 27.
Yeah.
And I say that because, look, we keep waiting. It's this hopeful thing with Trevor Lawrence, right? And he's had some games, and me and you sit here on Sunday night. We're like, this is it. Trevor's arrived. Maybe this really was it. This did feel like a moment for Trevor Lawrence. They're down to the Ravens. He's got to drive them the length of the field. We think just a tie. They're down 7 at that point. And they face 3rd and 21, and he gets out of it. He completes the pass to Marvin Jones for the touchdown. And then Doug Peterson, I think to his credit, I was fully on board with it, decides to go for 2. Lawrence throws a dart to Zay Jones for the 2-point conversion. They win, big win. A bad loss for the Ravens, let's say that too, especially the Bengals playing better and winning today. But I thought this was Trevor Lawrence's, hey, all right, that is the guy. Like, and I know we've said that before, and then the next week he throws for 148 yards and doesn't look great. So we'll see if he can build on this, but impressive drive by Trevor Lawrence, impressive game by Trevor Lawrence against a defense I think we both respect.
Yeah, bringing him back. Like, I recognize that Trevor Lawrence, but we don't see that guy. And that's the guy we've talked about this in the podcast before. Every once in a while, he'll have a moment or a game or a quarter where we're like, oh yeah, that's the Clemson guy. That's the first pick. That's the that's the transformational player that you only get, once every decade, whatever. That's what he had against the Ravens. That final drive was spectacular. And then being in the moment, being, Doug Peterson, which I loved it. You don't have anything to lose if you're the Jaguars right now.
No.
Absolutely go for it. Because if you get it, it can create a foothold moment. It's just one of those moments that builds confidence in a team. It's like back when Frank Reich was doing it with Andrew Luck, and I hated it. I used to complain about it all the time. And then all of a sudden I kind of watched the Colts psyche turn around because they're like, man, we love that this guy gambles on us, that he's willing to let us go for it. I think this is one of those moments where it's got to give Trevor Lawrence and all those other guys around him confidence that, you have a coach who says, Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it. And then Trevor Lawrence pays off, as you said, with an absolute dart for the
That had some
2-point conversion.
velocity on it, man.
Oh, yeah, man.
It was a
He
short
made sure.
pass, but he made sure that thing got in there. Thankfully, Zay Jones caught it. What about the Ravens side of this? Because I do think this is it's a pretty big moment for the Ravens too this season. Their offense just, man. Let's be honest. Lamar played great early in the season. He hasn't had a lot to work with, but this offense hasn't been good in a while, and Lamar hasn't been making the plays that he usually does. He almost pulled us out, and we're probably talking about that if Trevor Lawrence doesn't complete that long drive. But yeah, it just doesn't look completely right for the Ravens the last couple of weeks. You worry about their offense going forward. I do. I worry about their offense.
Well, and I feel like some things are stacking up with Lamar too. That like, remember when he popped up with the arm sleeve early on in the season? It's like, hey, he's out of practice with an arm sleeve because he banged his elbow. And it's one of those sleeves that facilitates blood flow. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, well, he banged it badly enough that he had to wear a sleeve in practice, and he didn't throw during the reporter session early in practice. It was early in the week, but still, it's like one of those early things where you're like, okay, let's keep track of this. Then it's like a hip now, right? Oh, he's got a hip, but he's going to be okay. You're like, okay, doesn't sound like a guy who's fully healthy right now, which usually means it's probably worse than we know.
Right.
Because they hide, whatever they're telling you, it's the tip of the iceberg. And then, as you said, functionally, the offensive line around him, the one thing that happened in this game where I was like, as messed up as it is, they kind of need Deshaun Jackson.
I know, right?
Like he made a big play downfield, and I'm like,
huge.
Okay. Like if they could just get a guy who can make a big play downfield. I don't care if he's
Deshaun Jackson's going to be like, Deshaun Jackson's going to be like 60 years old, running 9 routes and beating a defense deep once a game. It's unbelievable how that guy can still beat a defense deep.
What's he? He's like 37, right? Isn't Deshaun Jackson?
I think he's 36, 37. Yeah, it's amazing. He's one of the best deep threats of our lifetimes, and he made the big play. And you're right, they need something. It's really thin on offense, and they were struggling a long time in this game. They ended up with 27 points, but it wasn't that pretty for their offense. And now, the Bengals got that win today. This is a pretty big change in the NFC North today. It was a bad loss for the Ravens to lose the way they did, obviously.
Yeah. All right, well, let's kick it ahead. The Cleveland Browns at home beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 23-17 in overtime in a game that, look, the Browns, the faintest of playoff hopes right now. But I said Buffalo, Tampa Bay, they got to split that too. It'd be great if they could win both games. They got to split that too to be able to hand a team off to Deshaun Watson that could conceivably run the table and hit 10 wins. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't. But they did it. Deshaun Watson's going to come in against Houston next week with a team that, look, they'd have to have a lot of things go the right way. Like I said, they'd have to run the table to have any shot at a playoff run. But they're not completely dead. And, I was more troubled when I looked at that game, far more troubled with Tampa, because I sit there and I go, well, let's see. Chris Godwin showed. That's great. But something was off between Brady and Mike Evans. Tristan Wirfs, straight up, that loss for that line is, if you had said to me, like, name the one guy the line cannot lose, name the anchor, it's Tristan Wirfs. You cannot lose Tristan Wirfs.
Great, right?
And it looks like he's potentially, I've not seen the injury update tonight, but it appears to be potentially season-ending injury.
Yeah, ugly injury. Ugly injury, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. You tell me. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, Tampa, to me, I mean, someone's got to make it from the NFC South, right?
Right.
Somebody has to make it.
They're going to.
We're probably going to be Tampa. Who's going to be left at that
the Falcons,
stage?
I'll tell you. Yeah, it's one of those teams where I keep saying to myself, they're going to win the division, and I think everybody would guess that. But the team that makes the playoffs, it's not going to be one that can flip a switch. It's just not. Like, I mean, especially the Wirfs injury, if that is season ending. And it certainly looked awful. Like, it really didn't, it looked good for that. So we'll see. I do want to give real quick a shout out to Jacoby Brissett, because in this game, look, they got, I believe it was 4th and 10 at the end. He throws up a ball to Njoku that David Njoku makes a great play on to tie the game.
One-hander.
Fantastic catch. But then in overtime, they get the ball and looks like, okay, we might get a tie here. Brissett drives them down. Huge pass to Amari Cooper to set up Nick Chubb's game-winning touchdown. And Jacoby Brissett, I thought, during this 11 games, he's going to, give over the job to Deshaun Watson. I thought over these 11 games, Jacoby Brissett showed a lot of things. Yeah, they're only 4-7, but that's not all his fault. I thought he played well to the point of he's now signed 10 more years worth of checks as a backup quarterback if he wants. He's going to give a Marcus Mariota type of, hey, be our bridge quarterback. We'll give you a chance to start this year. Whatever it is for Jacoby Brissett. I thought over this whole deal, he accounted himself very well, and including today. He was a big part of their win, and he can hand that team over now to Deshaun Watson and say, well, not as pretty as it should have been, but we're not dead. It could have been 3-8, but pulled it out. I thought that was pretty good for him. And on Tampa Bay side, yeah, it's tough to start telling yourself a story that this season's going to turn out well for Tampa Bay, whether they're in the playoffs or not. It's just one of those years where it's just everything's going wrong. Nothing's easy. Everything's a grind for them. And it just, again, this loss was kind of it's symptomatic of all of it, where it's just they should have won this game pretty easily, and they just couldn't put the Browns away, and it ended up stinging them at the end.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the very least, Brissett, I think Cleveland's probably the right place for him. I really do. Like, if they can figure out a way to keep him long term.
Yeah. He played pretty well. Like, not great, but he has played pretty well this season.
There were a number of games they could have won that went the opposite way, right? Like, he kept them close in a number of games, and the defense has not been good this year, right? Nope. I mean, it's important. They're going to fire the defensive coordinator when the season's over. To me, look, if he's comfortable with how he communicates with Watson, because in a backup quarterback role, you're there to support the main. Because in a backup role, you're there to support the quarterback, the starter. You're there to help them prepare, to study, to watch film. If his relationship is good enough with Watson in that respect, keep him on board, and the team's familiar with him. And if something happens, God forbid, to Watson, and you need to have somebody step in, it's great that he's familiar with the personnel and the coaching staff. So I think it's a good spot for him. And I agree that he acquitted himself quite well. Let's jump into the next one. The Cincinnati Bengals go into Tennessee. They win 20-16, and we can get into the game. But something I thought was really interesting here was after the game, I was listening to Joe Burrow, and he was talking about the vibe, the feeling of winning this game, the way that they won it. He was like, this reminds me of how we got into the groove down the stretch last season. He was like, this feels like, we started to create our own breaks. Things started to kind of, chemistry wise, we're flowing in the right direction. And it just, that has that similar feel of when they went on that run last year. I believed him when he said it. I was like, because they didn't beat a bad team, beat a good team, and they beat a good team in their place. And they did it in a way where if you watch that game, they very easily could have lost this. Yeah, they could have. And they had some adversity in this game for sure. I mean, we like to think that, well, the Bengals have so many good offensive players. It doesn't matter. Well, you're without Jamar Chase, who's probably a top 5 receiver in the NFL. You're without Joe Mixon, who had been coming on, pretty strong, scored, I think it was 5 touchdowns a few weeks ago. Those are big losses. You're on the road against the Titans, and you somehow win a game. I thought Burrow played really well. T. Higgins has been really, really good for the most part with Chase out. So I thought that you're right. Positive steps for the Bengals. They are looking pretty good. The loss for the Ravens is huge for them. Now they're right back there. Like, they're right where they want to be with, 6 weeks left to go in this season or whatever, 7 weeks, whatever it is. It's really not a bad place for the Bengals to be. And like you said, you can get confidence this way, going in and winning close games like that. It's not always sustainable, but I do think there is a confidence element to it. And on the other side of it, I just think, look, I hate to do this every time the Titans lose, but it's like you look and you're like, that's why we can't buy fully into the Titans. That's why, no matter that Mike Vrabel's a great coach and they always have a better record than they should, it's games like this where you just say, yeah. I mean, their only touchdown in this game was Treylon Burks falling on a fumble in the end zone. Yeah, I mean, that's the only touchdown they got. They didn't move the ball okay, but this is not a dynamic offense. They thrive on not beating themselves. And then they did at the end when one of their defensive linemen kind of loses his mind and hits the long snapper, which you can't do. It's just a mental mistake, which is really, really rare from a Mike Vrabel team. So I thought this was as good of a win as this was for the Bengals. It's not a terrible loss for Titans because they're still going to win the division, but it's a loss that kind of reminds us that this Titans team, its ceiling is probably limited. It's probably not going to be a Super Bowl team, at least with this construct they have. Yeah, and I again, it to me, there's in some respects, I've kind of felt like the Titans were always somewhat one-dimensional just because they were very much a power running team.
Mm-hmm.
They were very much a second half team that just wore you out and whooped your ass, and then down the stretch eventually broke you. And that team had A.J. Brown, right? And you don't have A.J. Brown now, and it's not like we haven't talked about this before, but the element there is missing, and I like the DNA of it. I do, but they're going to have to figure out how to take the DNA of what they are and who they are, which is very consistent and very winnable, but you're going to have to kick it up another level, right?
Yeah,
you're going to have to do something offensively, whether it's at quarterback or skill positions, whatever else you need. And by the way, man, like Derrick Henry, that window's not going to last forever. Okay. He's going to break at some point. He's going to start breaking down. And then you're fundamentally really going to have to, alter what you do offensively or retool it in a way that's really significant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a credit to Vrabel that he gets what he does out of this group, because we know they're limited. We know they are. And they still win. They're 7-3. They're really good. But it's like you said, there has to be some other gear somewhere that they're going to have to find. Let's kick it ahead to a really interesting game. It wasn't a good game by any means, but the New York Jets win 31-10. And obviously this was interesting because Mike White takes over for Zach Wilson, who somebody said looked like a Lord of the Rings extra with his hoodie on. You saw that, right? You saw that? Yeah, I'm getting
that was funny.
That's hilarious. But honestly, like Charles, I'm sitting there watching that game, and I'm obviously paying attention because I want to see what Mike White does. The first drive of the game, I'm like, I haven't seen the Jets offense all year.
Nope.
And it's not like Mike White is some world beater. I'm sorry, he's not. Like, but he's such an upgrade over Zach Wilson that I seriously, and I don't even think I'm joking about this. At least since Wilson took over from Flacco, I think the 5 best passes of the Jets season were in that first drive. Like, it was like, I haven't seen the offense even look like this. It hasn't even looked functional like this. And Mike White's, all he's doing is getting the ball to his playmakers, getting it out on time. He's very good. He was very good at his timing in this game. He was accurate. He got the ball out. I thought he played really, really well. Now this Bears defense stinks. It absolutely stinks. But for him to come out, look really good, guys obviously rallied around him. Elijah Moore must have felt like, the weight of the world's off his shoulders. Get a quarterback and actually get him the ball now. I thought this was a really positive game for the Jets. And I think you tweeted about this. A really bad look for Zach Wilson. I mean, whatever. It's the same exact scenario. And Mike White, a total journeyman, throws for 315. It looks great. Where we haven't seen that in Zach Wilson, honestly, in 2 seasons.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I wrote about it. To me, what was most stunning about this game, once you got past the football part of it, which was stunning, how the offense looked so remarkably functional. It was like
totally different.
It was like he threw, Mike White completes passes to 10 different players. Okay. But the thing is, Denzel Mims caught a pass in this game. Okay. Elijah Moore catches a couple passes, scores a touchdown, right? It's like guys who literally looked like they were on the scrap heap with Zach Wilson all of a sudden are like functional players again. And I'm like, hey, they have functional pass catchers. And if you went through and you looked at, I think he completed, I want to say 22 or 26 passes, something like that. 22 or 28. It was really efficient. A lot of it was just structured, real, like, hey, we're gonna gear up for easy completions here. There's gonna be a lot of short stuff, and then we're gonna let you throw a couple intermediate ones. He threw some nice tight intermediate ones, and Garrett Wilson, does the hard work, and Elijah Moore does the hard work, and he threw a beautiful touchdown pass to Elijah Moore. It just, to me, it underscored all the stuff that, you hear about Zach Wilson. Oh, well, he was overwhelmed with the offense, and he was having a hard time even making like normal completions because he was just so consumed with how much detail there was in the offense. So they had to retool the offense and like shrink it down, shorten it up for him so that, there were only a handful of things he had to think about and process, while he's running the offense. What was remarkable to me, again, sorry, this is long here, after all the football, everybody comes out and they're gushing, right? Everybody's, they're yelling at Elijah Moore in the locker room. They're like, he's free, like all this stuff. And you're like, whoa, that's in the locker room. Yeah. Like Zach Wilson's in that locker room. Okay. And everybody's gushing about Mike White and how he ran the offense and he was efficient. But then Robert Saleh, this is wild to me. I think this was the most important thing you heard, was Robert Saleh saying 2 things. Number one, he was like, you didn't have to be anybody but Mike White. We weren't trying to recreate the greatest show on turf. Where I'm like, ooh, okay. So you're basically saying, hey, you don't got to be this big playmaker, gunning it, throwing it down the field. Like, all you got to be is get the ball to our guys, real simple, and let them do the work for you. And we got a great defense. We're going to win some games. And then he said of Mike White, he made the easy things look easy. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm sorry. Like straight up, that is to me saying, and I don't care if Robert Saleh would deny it or whatever, someone's saying I'm misinterpreting it. To me, I heard Zach Wilson was making easy things look hard.
I think
and this kid just makes easy things look easy. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to get away from the comparison of how the offense looks with Zach Wilson versus how the offense looks basically with anybody else. They had their moments with Flacco, even Flacco early in the year, or last year. I said this at the end of Zach Wilson's rookie season that they played 4 quarterbacks last year, the 3 we've mentioned, and then Josh Johnson also got at least 1 game. And Zach Wilson was 4th best out of those guys. And you could complain, you could say, oh, the Jets don't have an offensive line or this or that with the Jets. Well, these other guys are functioning totally fine in the offense. Zach Wilson gets in there and it's a total dumpster fire. What's the difference? Like, it's easy to see what the variable is here. I just thought, it's weird to say, but this is a terrible day for Zach Wilson. If Mike White goes out there and throws 4 interceptions and they score 7 points against a terrible defense, we'd all be like, well, what are they going to do? You got to go back to a drawing board, whatever. Now it's like Zach Wilson ain't getting his job back this year. Right. I can't even imagine they turn back to him unless they have to, or the wheels just totally fall off Mike White when he places a tougher defense. But it's going to be really interesting going forward to see what they do with this kid, because he's still the 2nd pick of the draft. He can't just, it's hard to just be like he's sunk cost after what would he have, about 18, 20 starts, whatever it is. It's hard to just say we can't do it with you, but I don't know where the positives are.
Here's the thing though. He's going to have to earn his way back into it, because I'm going to tell you right now, unless Mike White, like you said, completely implodes and the defense is just like, oh man, like we're screwed. Doesn't really matter what we do at this point. Like, they're not, that locker room, after you saw the outpouring of emotion, how happy guys were, how much fun. Oh, this is, Elijah Moore saying that's real Jets football. You can't step in as the coach or the general manager and say, well, yeah, we got to get the number 2 pick, another shot here, because they'll revolt. They're going to be like, no way. We're holding up our end of the bargain. This guy's playing fine. Like, you got to let this ride out. And, to me, I think the last time Mike White got benched, he had a 4 interception game. I think if he does that again, he gets another start after that.
I'd agree. Yes. Yeah. I mean,
I don't think they just pull the plug after one bad game.
I don't either, unless they go on some losing streak, and that's at the end of a 4-game losing streak, and it's not really his fault, but you just got to switch things up. But I do want to say something. I mean, you said kind of maybe people think you're reading too much into it, but me and you have been around locker rooms long enough to know these guys can't just come out and say stuff, right? They can't, but sometimes they can't help themselves to say things where if you read between the lines.
This was that day.
And even during the week, there was a lot of stuff said, on Monday where you're like, even go back to Garrett Wilson last Sunday when he's ripping the offense. You can't separate ripping the offense from Zach Wilson's play. You're not talking about Michael Carter when you're ranting like that. We all know what he was talking about.
Right.
So you could tell without anybody just coming out and flat out saying it, the Jets locker, he needs to win that locker room back. Zach Wilson does. It's going to be a long process for him, and we'll see. It's really pretty much a step backwards for Zach Wilson, a step forward for 2022 New York Jets today, as far as I see it.
And they're going to Minnesota next, so there's going to be like, if Mike White now goes out there and they're functional against the Minnesota Vikings and they're competitive, again, I think he's stacking sandbags right now, and I think he's fortifying his position. It's going to be really, really interesting seeing how this all works itself out. All right, moving it forward. Oh, Frank.
Yeah,
the McDaniels, the Josh McDaniels hate. And what is Josh McDaniels reeling them off? He's just reeling them off now. Las Vegas Raiders beat the Seattle Seahawks, a good Seattle Seahawks team, by the way. Full strength. Now they got They got a little McDaniels stink on them now, and you're like, maybe I don't like them so much. Anyway, Vegas wins at Seattle, 40-34 in overtime. Josh Jacobs. It was funny.
beast in this game. My
Bro,
goodness.
it was great because when I went through Raiders camp, right, and I talked to them, the idea was, hey, we got a bunch of backs here, probably going to rotate them. They hadn't picked up Jacobs' like 5th-year option, so they didn't. I don't think they thought this is what he could ultimately be for them. So of course I tweet it in a little notebook, and of course, like 4 months after my visit, some clown pulls it up and says, "Oh, this tweet was about the Raiders. They're gonna rotate backs and da, da, da." And I'm like, bro, if they knew this is who Josh Jacobs is going to be, you do not pass the 5th-year option. You pay him the 5th-year option. Because now they're in a weird situation because Jacobs looks worthy of being paid to a level where you're comfortable paying a running back to. None of these 15, 16, $17 million deals. 12? Maybe.
Yeah, I know, right? And I had the same thing happen. I mean, Jacobs he played in a Hall of Fame game, and we're like, they didn't pick up the 5th-year option. He's playing in a Hall of Fame game. Like, is this guy on thin ice? They're going to trade him?
Yeah.
They're just going to dump him? Like, what are they going to... Maybe this regime doesn't like him because I'll take all the L's. I thought, and I tweeted about this, that I just thought Josh Jacobs was just a guy. Like, he was fine. Like, he's a perfectly fine starting NFL running back. He's not a guy you should bench or anything, but he wasn't special in my mind before the season. And I don't know if the Raiders saw that he was special either. And some of the tape guys on Twitter got at me and were like, hey, honestly, he's really, really good. He just, because of this or that, he hasn't really broken through. And I'm like, I need to see it. Well, I'll take the L. I've seen it. He is having an outstanding year. Just a type of pretty much all pro season. Like you can make an argument. He is the best back in football this year, or at least in a very, very short list. So yeah, when you say like, what's he going to get paid? I hate second contracts for running backs, but some team that has the luxury to do it thinks like the Bills. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you have the cap room for it next year. Why not? If you think like, hey, our window's still open, but we're running back away, like, yeah, let's pay Josh Jacobs on a deal we can get out of reasonably easily. He's really, really good. He just played out of his mind. And that run today, he just exploded through the hole. Took off 86 yards, thrilling moment. I think it's one of the top 10 yards from scrimmage games of all time. I think he went over 300 in this game, 303 or something like that. Just crazy good game. Now, on the Seattle side of it, though, I kept saying, Seattle's a good team, Seattle's a good team. I'm starting to waver a little bit. Now we're starting to see them regress a little bit. You can't lose them to the Raiders if you're a good team. And now I think they're out of the playoff race now because all 4 NFC East teams would be in if the season ended today. I don't know. Where do we go with Seattle? I mean, this wasn't Geno. I don't want to make this into like, oh yeah, pumpkin Geno.
Frank,
no, Geno was really good. The defense
Frank, they scored 34 points.
Yeah. They were great. Because that's been a big part of the Seattle story, right? Is, Geno's awesome, but is he going to turn into a pumpkin? This wasn't Geno. Geno played really well in this game. Made some great throws. I thought that they got hosed on the DK Metcalf reversal. If you got to look at something for 3 minutes, it's not conclusive. Move on. That's a catch. I don't think that they found anything conclusive, but that happens. I just thought the defense was terrible in this game, and maybe people are figuring things out about the Seahawks, and they're not going to be able to get back on track because I think we both would agree the 49ers are going to run away with this division now.
Yeah, I don't look again. Remember the great things that a lot of greatness to that defense early on was, a lot of young players, right? I mean, it was like all high energy, teachable. Pete's got them cranked, all these different things. But young players on defense, much like, first year quarterbacks or whatever, give an opponent enough time, they start to figure out some things, some weak spots. They know who to go after, or this great player, that great player, they know what here's this singular thing that he's bad at. Let's put him in, make sure we get him in that situation and then take advantage of it. I'm not going to overreact to this. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the offense still looks great. And look, Kenneth Walker didn't even have a great game in this one at all. Like, not at all. And still the point scoring to me was, man, it just sucks in the NFL when, you score 34 points. And I mean, like, if you have a defense that can hold every single team to like 18, 19 points now, you're going to be like 13-4, 14-3. Like,
it's Denver
insane.
Broncos. Yeah.
No, God, here we go. Yeah. You can check out Frank on Twitter at Yahoo Schwab. You can get me at Charles Robinson. You can get our ace producer at Brett Rader. And make sure you check out the mothership at Yahoo Sports. And as always, if you could help us keep Therese Paler's legacy alive, check out Breaking Tea. That's capital T.com/Therese for the All Juice Tea or hoodie. Remember that all proceeds go to support the Therese A. Paler Scholarship at Howard University, and also the scholarship and also the scholarship in his name at Power Mizzou. If you want to donate to that, just check out our podcast description. Thought about Therese this weekend. Therese is a big Michigan fan, big Michigan football fan. And the win over Ohio State is one of those moments where I would have loved to have talked to him about it. And he was definitely one of those moments in Michigan football history that I think he would have really, really cherished. And it stinks that he wasn't here to see it, but it was nice to think of him and the fan that he was of the Wolverines while we watched Jim Harbaugh put together what I thought was one of the best wins, if not the best win of his coaching career. If you could, please give us a 5-star review, tell a friend, help us grow the pod. We really appreciate it. And I will be back on Wednesday with a new episode. Talk to you then. Peace.